When most people think of the term homemaker, they think of somebody who does all the cooking, cleaning, staying home and taking care of the children, makes the home just a happy and comfortable and welcoming place to be. And those are all attributes of a good homemaker. There's also something that a lot of people are missing out on. We're going to talk about the one thing that I think most homemakers are not thinking about while I cook dinner. If you hear me chopping or other noises, that is why. I'm going to go over the basic ways to be prepared first, and then I'm going to go into some things that you may not think of. I have been a stay-at-home mom for going on 7 years now, and I have learned a lot along the way. Being a stay-at-home mom and homemaker, I have grown in so many ways. I have learned how to make so many different things from scratch. I went from buying processed foods to learning how to make my own Pop-Tarts, canning anything and everything, like this meat that I just canned today. Also just putting up wild game meat. This is some wild game hamburger that I'm cooking dinner with tonight. The one thing I think people are missing about being a homemaker is being prepared in different situations and not necessarily being a full-on prepper, because I'm not going to say that I don't believe in prepping, because I do like to have as much stuff prepped as possible. I have some 5-gallon buckets full of rice and beans and wheat berries, stuff like that. But I also don't believe in being in fear and living in fear. At the end of the day, if it's in God's plan and if it's in His will, it will be done. His will be done. Let's talk about the different ways that you can be prepared as a homemaker and what exactly I mean by being prepared. Being prepared doesn't have to mean going crazy and prepping and buying all of this freeze-dried food and stuff like that, having, 20 pounds of batteries, of every type of battery. I do think it's a good idea to keep extra stuff like that around, but like I said, you don't really need to go all out because God's got your back. I think having the skills to be prepared and to take care of your family, if you ever need to be in that type of situation, is very important. Even if you don't live out in the middle of nowhere like we do, it's still a good idea to have certain skills, because even in the middle of a city or a town, there are things that you can find to forage, to, there's animals, there's plants. It may not be ideal, but learning how to cook and use these things or identify plants, it's super important. It's just overall a great skill to have. I'm going to talk about a few different ways that you can be prepared for your family without being a super extreme prepper. It's great, especially where we live, because if we get snowed in, the power goes out, whatever, we know that we have plenty of food to get us by and not have to worry about getting out and getting to the store. So it is good, especially if you live in a rural area like I do, to keep your pantry pretty well stocked. You don't have to go as far as having the 5-gallon buckets of food like I do. Just having a little bit of food stocked up is a good way to be prepared. So stocking up on foods is one thing. Having the knowledge to make things from scratch, believe it or not, is more of a preparation thing. There's like this big movement on social media where people want to make their snacks from scratch because they're healthier and stuff, which is great. I'm 100% in that boat. But it's not just about being healthier. It's also having the skills and the knowledge to use stuff like fresh milled flour. I could grow my own wheat berries if I had to. I have a hand crank grinder, so I could grind them and still make my own stuff. If I don't know how to use those things and cook with that fresh milled flour, and I only know how to make stuff with all-purpose flour from the store, what am I gonna do if things, really hit the fan and there's no more flour at the store ever, or I can't go to the store anymore? Having the knowledge to make your own things from scratch. And I'm not just talking about breads. I'm talking about canning your own meat, because these are shelf stable now and they will last years as long as you make sure they are sealed properly. Canning your own jams and jellies. We don't buy jam and jelly from the store anymore because I could do all of my own canning. These were wild huckleberries. I will buy strawberries from a local farm in the spring, and I will also try to grow my own. There's so many things you can make from scratch. I try to make a lot of my own seasonings. Taco seasoning was one of the first seasonings that I started making from scratch. Also, back to the grain thing a little bit. Having a sourdough starter, which is super easy to maintain. People don't really realize the whole purpose of it. It's not about baking these fancy sourdough things that everybody's ranting and raving about online. It's about not needing yeast. So sourdough starter, it's not just a fad that you should get into. It's something that you should get into because you never know when you'll run out of yeast or not be able to buy some at the store. Maybe the store runs out. So a lot of the things I'm talking about being prepared for involve the kitchen, but not everything involves the kitchen. I kind of talked about foraging and hunting earlier. It is so important, in my opinion, to know these skills in case things ever do go to a point where you have to rely on yourself to provide food and shelter and security for not only yourself but your family. And again, it doesn't matter where you live. There are animals, there are forageable plants, they're out there, you just have to find them. Stuff like knowing how to process an animal, even if it's just something like a squirrel, just knowing how to skin and gut a squirrel because you can eat squirrels. In a starvation scenario, you got to do what you got to do. So just having those skills and knowing how to process and clean an animal is a lot more important than most people think. And all of this ties back into being the homemaker. I believe it's our job as a homemaker to kind of take care of our families. And yeah, hopefully in a situation like this, we have our husband or some kind of man as a provider, but we may not always have that. I think it's important for us to know that as well. And foraging is another very important skill that I think we as homemakers should know. How to identify plants, not only because we can eat them, but they can also be used as medicines and herbal remedies and stuff like that. We have a lot of cattails down in our wetlands. You can cook the roots of the cattail, kind of like potatoes. You can also dry them and grind them and use them as flour. Obviously, they're not going to have the same reaction as a regular store-bought flour would have. I mean, you could use it to thicken soups and stews and stuff like that. You can also cook the stalks when they're young. You can cook them as a green. It's foraging, knowing your wild edibles and medicines, and knowing how to process and clean a wild animal, whether it is a bird or squirrel or even a full-on game animal. Of course, you start with a squirrel because realistically a squirrel is the same as something like a deer. It's just much smaller. So next, that brings me on to another thing to be prepared for as a homemaker, and that is power outages. And the reason I say power outages is because a lot of people would straight up, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, they would expire if the power went out. And that's not necessary. I mean, we don't need power to live. I mean, if you're on an oxygen machine or something like that, then that's totally different. Like, obviously you do need power to live, but a normal, healthy adult does not need power to live. And it is our job as homemakers to make sure that our families will be taken care of if the power goes out for long periods of time by, again, knowing how to preserve food, to make it shelf stable. That way, if our freezers or refrigerators go out, we don't have to worry about not having any food. And also learning how to cook on a wood stove, which not everybody has a wood stove. I know if you live somewhere in the South, then you probably don't have a wood stove, but cooking on a fire is similar. You can have a cast iron Dutch oven and cook on a fire, cook on a wood stove, whatever. Just cooking in a non-traditional way, not on a regular stovetop or with a regular oven. It's a really important skill to have, in my opinion, in case something happens. That is one thing I love about cooking with cast iron is you can cook with it on any surface. So if you're used to cooking with it on a stovetop, you can pretty much cook with it anywhere. It's actually quite simple. I love my cast iron. I know cast iron is heavy. I just love cooking with it, and it makes you stronger. You get used to lifting these heavy pans up and down, then you won't have a problem with it. It'll become very second nature and easy. So being able to cook over a fire or on a wood stove, it's important. Another thing about the power going out, which this is more of a luxury, not so much a survival thing, but that's just having sources of light, having things charged up, having extra batteries for your flashlight. Another thing I love to have is these old kerosene lamps. You put kerosene in here and light it, and they actually get really bright, and you can often find those at thrift stores. Another thing that I want to show you really quick is having a battery powered lantern. This is the low setting, and then you just turn this dial up, and then you keep turning it to this little light up top here, and it's just like a different kind of light. But even that, look how bright that is. It also has a spotlight. It's a pretty bright spotlight. It has 2 settings and a flashing setting, and it's rechargeable. It has a hanger so you can hang it up. It has a handle so you can hold it. I'm going to be using this so much for ice fishing, but it's also a great thing to have for power outages. It's by Lux Outdoor, and I will link it in the description below, but I always make sure to have it to where I can find it easily if the power goes out. So the moral of that story is being a homemaker is more than just keeping a clean house and a happy home. It's more than just cleaning and cooking. Being prepared is an important part of being a homemaker, and I hope that by watching this video, I've inspired you to learn some new skills that can help you be a more prepared homemaker. If you want to learn more about being a prepared homemaker, in the coming months, I will be sharing tips, tricks, skills, and how-tos. If you liked my video, please make sure to like and subscribe. Leave me a comment if you can think of any other ways that you could be a prepared homemaker. I'll see you in the next one.